9:30, I'd ask that everybody silence their cell phones, please. Make sure that they're off. Chief Auditor, you don't have to silence your cell phone. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the August 2nd West Fargo City Commission meeting. I'd ask that you please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. First order of business is to approve the order of the agenda. Commissioners, it has been distributed and sent out to the public.
I move we approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Olson. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Jurdovic seconds. It's been moved and seconded to approve the order of the agenda as presented this evening. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Next order of business is the approval of the minutes of July 19, 2021. They have been distributed and they are online.
I would make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Jurdovic. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner George seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the minutes of July 19th, 2021. Is there any further discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Next order of business is the consent agenda. We have items A through F on the consent agenda for this evening. It have been distributed and it is online. Commissioners, do you have any changes that you'd like to make?
I move we approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Olson. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner George seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the consent agenda, items A through F as distributed. Is there any discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Moving on to the regular agenda. Item number 1 is the first reading and a public hearing of the proposed Sunrise Acres third subdivision, Re-Plat and Rezone. Mr. Peterson, Planning and Zoning.
Thank you, Mr. Commission President and Commissioners. The applicant has submitted an application for a replat and rezone of property located in the city's extraterritorial area, about 1.5 miles north of West Fargo city limits. The applicant owns a lot on the east end of the Ann Street, which was previously used as a horse pasture, and is proposing subdividing the lot into 2 lots for sale and development. Another applicant to the north owns a vacant lot on the west side of Ann Street, which was previously used for horses as well. The applicants are proposing to rezone the properties to R-1E rural estate to construct single-family dwellings. The area is within a special flood hazard area. City of West Fargo floodplain development regulations will require the applicants to construct homes 2.5 feet above the base flood elevation. Any development will be required to meet all applicable federal, state, and local regulations. Property owners within 150 feet and applicable agencies and departments, including Reed Township officials, Cass County Planning and Zoning, and Cass County Sanitary, were notified. Staff received a comment from a neighbor to the east who was worried about accessing her property. There is a public easement on the north side of the property that can be used for access. Staff also received comment from the county sanitarian, indicating they have no issues with the proposal. The suburban restricted growth sector, which this area is located in, includes areas between the current and proposed diversion that may have new development potential should the new diversion be built. The restricted growth sector identifies significant tracts of land that are currently rural but where directed and well-planned new development could occur around the future mixed-use and employment centers. The surrounding area is currently zoned for rural estate residential development. Increasing the density of an existing residential lot may be seen as a benefit, provided that it does not increase the burden to agencies which may serve the property. It is recommended that the Commission approve the first reading of the proposed application on the basis that it is consistent with city plans and ordinances, with recommended conditions of final approval as follows. 1, that any building permits should follow the preliminary flood map, which will require % allowable fill on any development. 2, that any concerns from Fargo Cast Public Health with regard to on-site septic system on the newly proposed lot is addressed and or reviewed by the applicant prior to the consideration of the final plat. 3, that the applicant is to meet all federal, state, and local requirements for improvements to the site and structures. 4, an attorney title opinion is received. 5, a drainage plan is approved by the city engineer. 6, a final plat is received with any necessary easements. And 7, a certificate is received showing taxes are current. At their July 13th, 2021 meeting, the Planning and Zoning Commission recommended approval with the 7 conditions previously mentioned. This is a public hearing, and I'm available if you have any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Commissioners, do you have any questions of Mr. Peterson? All right, thank you. At this time, I'm going to close the regular agenda, and we're going into a public hearing with regard to the proposed Sunrise Acres third subdivision replat and rezone. Is there anybody from the public that would like to speak to this item? Is there anyone from the public that would like to speak to item number 1 on the regular agenda? The proposed Sunrise Acres third subdivision replat and rezone. Is there anyone from the public that would like to speak to this issue? Hearing none, the public hearing is closed. Commissioners, again, do you have any questions of Mr. Peterson? Commissioner Olson?
I just have a question on page 37 of our packet, Malachi.
Let me scroll to it here for you.
That's not our.
Yes.
That's out of order, right?
Correct. So that is for Willow Creek, which is another subdivision, which is also located in the ET. I do have the correct format map for you, if you would like to see that here.
And so then, just curious, is the next, I don't need that, but the next one is, if you scroll down, is that, for which one is that? Is that
So-
for the current one we're looking at, or?
Yep, so this one is correct. So all of the maps are correct except for this one right here.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that we understood that it looks totally different, and people are looking at this, we've got a couple things.
Thank you,
mixed together.
Commissioner. Good point. What's your pleasure, Commissioner?
I'd make a motion to approve with the 7 noted recommendations.
Thank you, Commissioner Jurdevig. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Olson seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the first reading with the 7 recommendations as outlined by staff. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Item number 2 is a public hearing, proposed Willow Creek second subdivision and rezoning. Mr. Peterson.
Thank you, Mr. Commission President and Commissioners. So yes, this is the one that map was intended for. The applicant has submitted an application to plat and rezone property located in the city's extraterritorial area, about 1.5 miles to the west of West Fargo city limits for sale and development. It has recently come to staff's attention, however, that a portion of the property has been designated for eminent domain action by the Red River Water Resource District. And on advice of the city attorney, staff would like to ask the commission to table this agenda item until such time that the applicant can provide additional documents related to this action, which will be needed for the final plat. Due to a public hearing for this item having already been scheduled and advertised for this evening, staff would recommend that the commission open the public hearing briefly for any comments before tabling the item.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Any questions of Mr. Peterson?
Just one.
Commissioner Olson.
This is a very large lot that's very irregular. Are we to expect more subdivisions of this, or will, or, in the future?
So at their July 13th Planning and Zoning Commission meeting, it was brought up that one of the conditions that would be proposed prior to final approval would be that there be a condition placed in a subdivision agreement with the property owner that would prevent further subdivision until such time that a area plan is provided to the Planning and Zoning Commission showing how utilities would be divided out for further subdivision.
Okay, thank you.
Additional questions? Hearing none, we're going to close the regular agenda again and go into a public hearing with regard to the proposed Willow Creek Second Subdivision and Rezoning. Is there anyone from the public that would like to speak to this issue? Is there anyone from the public that would like to speak to this issue? Emily, we don't have anybody online? Okay. Is there anyone that would like to speak to this issue of the Willow Creek Second Subdivision and Rezoning? Hearing none, the public hearing is closed. Commissioners, your thoughts?
I'll make a motion to table the action until the issues regarding the Cass County Joint Water Resource District have been resolved.
Thank you, Commissioner Jurdebig. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner George seconds. Been moved and seconded to table the proposed Willow Creek Second Subdivision and Rezoning as outlined by Mr. Jurdebig. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Item number 3 is a resolution establishing the Arts Partnership as a local arts agency in the city of West Fargo. Mr. Peterson, excuse me.
Thank you, Mr. Commission President and Commissioners. Staff has received a request from the Arts Partnership, which requests that the city of West Fargo formally recognize the organization as the local arts agency of West Fargo and grant the organization authority and power to distribute federal funds to local arts groups. At their July 28, 2021 meeting, the West Fargo Public Art Advisory Committee recommended approval of the resolution, which can be found in your packets. Dana Duvall, the president and CEO of the Arts Partnership, is here tonight to present you with a brief overview of the resolution, and then I will be available afterwards for any questions that you might have for me.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Good evening. Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you all. So this is a very informal request of you. It doesn't tie you to any funding. It really is just an opportunity for us to attempt to become the local art agency of all 3 cities, since we give funding from you to arts organizations in all 3 cities. I felt like it was incumbent upon us to reach out to all 3 of the communities and try to get this designation. Again, it does not tie you to any specific funding. It really affords us the opportunity to apply for federal funding, which we then can distribute to local arts agencies above and beyond the money that we currently get from the 3 communities, including West Fargo.
Are there any questions? No? Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any questions for Mr. Peterson? All right, Commissioners, your pleasure.
I move we approve.
Commissioner Olson moves to approve the resolution establishing the Arts Partnership as a local arts agency in the city of West Fargo. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Jurdevig seconds. Been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, Mr. Peterson. You're a busy man tonight. Item number 4 is the National Endowment for the Arts Our Town Grant Application. Mr. Peterson.
Thank you, Mr. Commission President and Commissioners. So in 2019, staff received permission from this commission, or at least the commission at that time, to apply for an Our Town grant through the National Endowment for the Arts with the hope of using the grant to pay for a master plan for public art in the city. A master plan is recommended by West Fargo 2.0, which is the city's comprehensive plan. While the city wasn't chosen for the grant in 2019, staff continued to pursue opportunities to support and encourage public art in West Fargo, including the formation of the Public Art Advisory Committee last year in 2020, and then also the organization of Color Fest, which was a large public art event in the yards on Cheyenne area earlier this spring. Staff would like to once again apply for the Our Town grant for a total of $50,000 with the same goal of using the grant to help fund the creation of a public art master plan through the hiring of a public art consulting firm. In order to apply for the grant, a letter of support from the highest ranking local government official is required, along with letters of support from area organizations. So far, staff has received a total of 6 letters of support, including letters from Bell Bank, Epic Events, the West Fargo Park District, the Arts Partnership, Epic Companies, and West Fargo Events. A proposed draft of what a letter from Commission President Dardis could look like is included in your packets. This letter is very similar to the letter that was sent on behalf of the city when we applied in 2019. If the city is chosen for the grant, the city would be required to provide a 1-to-1 match for federal dollars for a total of $50,000. The Economic Development Department has indicated that this 1-to-1 match could potentially come out of economic development sales tax dollars. If selected for the grant, staff would first approach the Economic Development Advisory Committee as well as the City Commission for approval of those dollars prior to officially or formally accepting the grant. At their July 28th, 2021 meeting, the West Fargo Public Art Advisory Committee recommended that the City Commission direct staff to apply for the grant. Tonight, I'm asking for an official motion from you to direct myself to submit an application for the grant on behalf of the city. If you have any questions, I'm more than willing to answer them.
Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Questions, Mr. Peterson? Commissioner George?
All right, so does this, if we were awarded this, though, it would cost the city $50,000, is that correct?
We would need a local match of $50,000, so that could come either on behalf of the city, so the public entity. It could also come from third-party funding as well, so we could fundraise that money from local businesses as well.
Okay, I'm glad that you clarified that could be matched through local businesses and not just committed to tax dollars on that match. Okay, appreciate clarifying that, thank you.
So we could go out and ask for sponsorships from the community or whatever?
Correct. It could kind of be like how we did Color Fest, where we have some portion of it from the city, but then another portion from local entities.
Mayor,
Please, Commissioner Simmons.
thank you. So Malachi, so if we approve this tonight, are we also, in essence, approving the $50,000 though, the match then?
No, so tonight, basically, you're just directing myself to go ahead and apply for the grant.
And then at that time, we can deny it if we can't find any other money.
Correct, yep. And we wouldn't receive word or notification on if we received this money or were chosen for the grant until, I believe it's March of next year.
Okay.
Additional questions? All right. Thank you, Mr. Peterson. Commissioners?
I'd make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Jurdevig. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Olson seconds. It's been moved and seconded to support the National Endowment for the Arts of Our Town grant application as presented this evening by Mr. Peterson. Is there any discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
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 Opposed? Motion carried.
Thank you, Commissioners.
Yes, sir, thank you. Item number 5, Chandler Thinks LLC contract for place branding professional services. Ms. Richard, Communication Director, City of West Fargo. Welcome, good evening.
Thank you, Commissioners. I come before you tonight to request your approval of a contract with Chandler Thinks out of Tennessee to hire them for place branding services for the City of West Fargo. I'll try to keep this brief because we have a packed agenda tonight. There was information in the agenda, but just to go over briefly why a community would look at something like place branding, it's helpful in differentiating and marketing the community. It's helpful in building community pride, and going through the process will also help us standardize materials so that it's used consistently throughout the city in the various applications. Why would we do it now? There's a few factors at play. One of them is that we've had significant change in the last 20 years when the brand was last studied, and I think we need to take a look at what the new population of West Fargo and the changes that have occurred, how that impacts our identity and how that might shape our personality and our brands. It will add brand assets. Right now, my department has the logo files, and we have a city on the grow, but there's a lot of study and work that goes into brand assets to help describe what the brand is, to provide templates to be used, just a lot of materials that, again, help standardize everything, and that would help our department work more efficiently. We've had some awesome major city projects in the last few years, including the Essentia Health Plaza and the POW MIA Plaza, and we would like to take a look at how that incorporates into the city branding so that we can better support those and demonstrate the commitment that the city has shown to the community and the leadership really to undertake those projects. There's also a West Fargo 2.0 recommendation to create a distinct market position for West Fargo to encourage economic investment and expand customer case for local businesses, as well as enhancing gateways and districts in West Fargo with branded signage. Those both fall under a big idea of growing the economy. This project will be supported through economic development sales tax, so that it aligns with the purpose of sales tax as well. The firm that we are recommending today is Chandler Thinks. They have 11 years of experience. They've done 41 placemaking projects that are similar to this. They've worked in Minnesota and Wisconsin, so they have had some experience in the Midwest. They're not local, so we would have a better outside perspective of what's going on in West Fargo to gather those key insights and to understand what possible changes might need to be made. They also provided a variety of case studies, and I was really impressed because there were different elements to each of the case studies. One showed, as a community that didn't have a brand that needed a brand new brand. One showed a community that had a brand but needed to make changes. Another one showed a community that discovered through the research process that their brand was correct, and that what it really needed was resources behind it to reinvigorate the brand. And I think that helps, that to me shows me that this is an agency that will use the research and the insights from the public really diligently and provide us those key insights that will really help us out. Their proposal was also in budget. Their total proposal for the project was $59,475,000, I believe. And we have budgeted $75,000 for this total project through economic development sales tax. The difference would be used for advertising during the public engagement session to make sure that the community has a chance to provide input and participate, and any unused funds would then go back into that sales tax fund. With that, I stand for any questions.
Any questions from Ms. Richard? Commissioner George?
When you're talking about this, like producing creative elements, like I saw some pictures of like the banners and whatever, so things like that or signage, is that specifically included in this 59, or would that be extra on top of that later?
That is, the development of the actual design would be created, but then implementing that, having it actually produced, would be cost later. I have requested additional funds in the 2022 budget for implementation of the brand.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Simmons?
Thank you. Sit back, Melissa, I have a few questions, please. So, I just mean, be ready. So one is, we just went through this downtown. We've talked, discussed. I'm less than pleased, quite honestly, with what we did down there. We spent $15,000, and I don't see one sign. I don't see one letterhead. I see nothing. And we hired this consulting firm, a different one, of course, to come in. And we talked the same stuff, how all this would happen. And at the end of the day, the name that actually came out, I believe it was Commissioner Jurgovich, that came up through the study with the yards and then the Cheyenne we knew we had to put in. And I'm not belittling that company because they did a good job. What I'm saying is that we spent a lot of money, and it was $15,000, but we saw, in my opinion, I see no results. And now we're going to turn around and we're going to do it again. And we're going to spend $60,000. And what scares me, it's not the $60,000. In all honesty, that's a drop in the bucket. And you know that. It's the money what's going to cost us if we implement this. And I almost think, in a sense, because we haven't talked about that at all, that we're putting the horse before the cart before the horse here. What are I'm assuming I wasn't part of the meetings, but I'm assuming we're going to have to, just like we did last time, send them all the information. Matt and his group is probably gonna have to spend a lot of time estimating how much it's gonna cost for water towers, trucks, office, a letterhead. I mean, I'm assuming you're shaking your head, Tim, but I'm assuming at some point that's part of, if we change this and move forward, we're gonna have to change that, right? Depending upon what we do.
Keena
Thank you,
Fisk, City
thank you,
Administrator.
Commissioner Simmons. And I'll let Melissa speak as she's more versed in all of this. But actually, in the discussions that we had, if the commission was to move forward and if we were to have a new brand created, then the communications department, along with other staff, would come back with, these are the things we think we should do, and these are the things we think we should wait to do. And for instance, water towers would be something that you just don't go paint a new logo on a water tower. You wait until the water tower needs repainting.
So we would hold off on the water towers until they would do. I get that. What about all the trucks? What about all the police vehicles, all the city, everything we got has letterhead. It
Yeah.
is a lot of money.
Yep, and I want to be clear that this project, although it will help with the city of West Fargo and the community as a whole, the fire department and the police departments already have graphic depictions and things like that don't match with what we're doing with the city already. So I hadn't planned on there being impact here. But overall, we would look at those changes in terms of when the trucks are replaced, when that opportunity arises, and then the changes are made. But this agency has also provides an implementation plan for us. So it will go through what needs to support the brand initially, and then what long-term we need to do. And they, as well as I, understand that it's a huge investment, and so we have to be strategic when we implement it, and really be thoughtful about it, but we can't do everything at once.
So what I'm hearing is that this implementation process, we could have 2 logos for quite a few years,
Yes, yep,
correct?
yes.
And another thing, as I look around the room, I see only 2 people that were here when we did this almost 20 years ago. And when I'm sitting next to me and I'm the other one, I think, Tina, I apologize, I don't think you were here. And when we did it the last time, if our citizens watching are older people, such as us, we did a contest, and it was very successful. Bernie, actually, the mayor was on that committee, I remember that. Why would we spend $60,000 to do this when, why don't we have our own, use our own? You're the imagination, you're the creative, you're the community. Why don't we do this ourselves and have a contest? Really get the public involved.
I wouldn't recommend it. I think we need someone with the professional expertise to do the research and go out to the community and understand how they feel about West Fargo and what they are experiencing with West Fargo, and then to work with them for those key insights and to develop it from there. If we do a contest, we're still only selecting based on one person's perspective of West Fargo, and then the judging organization's perspective of West Fargo. So I personally would not recommend that.
Okay, I personally would trust our citizens and our people over some consultant from some other state to come in. I mean, our logo's lasted almost 20 years, and to me, there's absolutely nothing wrong with that logo. I know I read in some of your notes, the north side and the south side. That logo has absolutely nothing to do with the north, in my opinion, the north side and the south side. And I'm not picking on you, so
I
you know.
understand.
You know how I feel about
Yep.
it. To me, it's just bizarre that we would even do this, so that's my personal opinion. I can't change your mind, so thank you.
I agree with everything you're saying, Commissioner Simmons. I think you're right. I think we have incredible creativity throughout the public of our city, and they know the city, and I think that's a fantastic idea that doesn't cost any money, or very little. Anyway, and then you're right, we just invested all that money into the yards. Why aren't we focusing on that, since that's what we've just spent money on? So I agree with everything you just said.
What Commissioner Simmons is referring to is at that time, our city looked very different 20 years ago, and it was a logo design contest, and Mayor Mathern's wife, myself, and one other individual did the judging, and I can't recall the third person. And that is what was the winner. It was a unanimous decision, and it was a West Fargoan that created that logo and still lives in West Fargo to this day. He's a friend of mine. So, and it was blind, so nobody knew who the designs were. But our city's changed dramatically, you know, with all the offerings that we have with the POW Plaza, the lights, and the Rusted Center, and all of these types of entities that are tied to the city of West Fargo. I can appreciate what Ms. Richard is trying to do here. I struggle too with the money, there's no doubt about that. The winner of that got $500. So, may I ask Lauren Orchard, Head of Economic Development for the City of West Fargo. Ms. Orchard, could I ask you to please come to the podium?
While she's doing that, Mayor, can I just make one more comment? I just want to make sure that that wasn't taken wrong, Melissa, by you.
No.
Not for me, but kind of what you said. Don't sell our citizens short. We got a lot of creativity, a lot of artistics in this community. As you saw, the musical, if anybody went to that, I mean, we have incredible talent, and I am far more confident that they can come up with something for us for a lot less money.
Sure. I do want to make one comment too. When we think about a brand, it really is more than a logo and more than a tagline. There's a lot that goes into it. So if we were to pursue that, I would still would want some resources to help flesh it out, to get all the pieces that we need in place to support it. So that would be a request that I would probably come back to.
Please, Mrs. Fisk, City Administrator.
Thank you, President Dardis. One thing I think that we need to think very clearly about, we're all very attached to this logo. This logo was created at a time that 20 years ago. Just think of the size we were 20 years ago. So at that time, doing a contest makes sense. Right now, we have a community that's so diverse that we have talented people, and all those talented people will be able to give input in this entire process. But I think we're a bigger city now, and we need to take a professional approach to how people view us. That's just my personal opinion, but I know how others feel. So thank you.
Thank you. The question I have for you, Ms. Orchard, is the last two presenters for the arts as well as this keep referring to your economic development dollars. And of course, being the head of that department, you have oversight on that and recommendations. Has there been ample communication with you with regard to this?
Thank you for that question, Commission President Dardis. Yes, I have met with both of these departments, planning and communications, about both of these projects, and we've compared it to the available funds, and I do plan to come to the City Commission later this year to review the Economic Development Sales Tax budget in whole, and we would address these projects at that time as well, because these are not expenditures I anticipate to happen right now. But yes, they have been in constant communication with me, and I'm very comfortable with them being able to fit within the Economic Development Sales Tax budget.
Thank you very much. So again, to understand, Chandler thinks this isn't just for the creative side of it. This is for the public engagement part, where there's going to be numerous meetings throughout various locations in the community and all of those types of things?
Yes, their plan includes a site tour for themselves to get to know the community and look at our assets. It also includes a large community survey, so every member of the community would have a chance to provide input there. It also includes stakeholder interviews, so we would identify stakeholders in the community and allow them, give them the chance to talk with Chandler Thinks and provide their perspective, as well as focus groups with a larger group of stakeholders. The things that they ask in that time are questions about what is West Fargo's greatest weakness, what is our greatest strength, for businesses, what is your typical customer group, who's coming in, who would you like to see come in, what is our most well-known and strongest assets. You know, like 2 years ago, that would probably be Sandy's Donuts. Now I think that would be a change. I think we'd hear about the lights and we'd hear about Essentia Plaza, with the strong support for Sandy's Donuts, of course. What are issues for recruiting talent and families to the community are. This is about West Fargo as the community. It is about the City of West Fargo as an organization, but it's also about helping to describe and position West Fargo for the businesses in our community who are looking for labor and trying to compel and attract people to the area.
Please, Commissioner Jurdevik.
So, I'm just going to reiterate a point here in that there's a really big difference between a logo and a brand. And I think the success of the lights is actually one of the main examples of that. That brand is well known throughout not just the West Fargo community, but on a much larger scale than that in a relatively short period of time. And I think the proposal that's in front of us, although certainly spending some money, it does leverage our local input and our local skill of our residents through the process. And I think we need to, realize that that's a part of what Chandler Thinks is doing.
Thank you, Commissioner Jerdavik. Commissioner Olson?
I agree with what Commissioner Jerdavik just said. Melissa, can you bring up the actual agenda package? And if you could go to page 99, just so it's up on the screen.
Is this the page? Oh, sorry. I don't know why it. I have the agenda pulled up. I can see it. So, I'm not sure.
I don't know how you would change that. What my point is, once she can bring that up, is there's, on page 99 of our packet, is like pamphlets, banners on flagpoles that could probably be used still if we keep the same logo as we have up here, but we could incorporate that with new photos of the city, people at the lights, but we still show that as part of our logo, but it would give us a new perspective on how to sell the community that we're using professionals to help us do that. I mean, we've got a great team in communications, but if we can, somebody who doesn't know the community and have our biases like the Sandies or other places like that, don't mean to give them all the free press here, but they could take a different look at it and maybe sell it in a different way we've never thought of.
I apologize, it's stuck on my PowerPoint here, so
That's-
I'm,
The next person's gonna wanna use that.
I know, I gotta get out of this.
Mayor, so
Yes,
I'll
Commissioner
just-
Simmons.
I'll just gotta make another comment. One, Tina, that you made, but first I'll say that, again, if you buy, as an example, the other thing I'll bring up is I get we're a big city, we're growing. I understand that. I understand professionalism and I understand the logo. This isn't about the logo at all to me. This is about, and I got a stand to show you, but this is what's in here, folks, your heart, your passion, your love for our community. Don't sell our people short. They'll figure this out. If it doesn't work, then we can come back and do this. I'm not against changing the brand. If it needs, but I think our citizens should have the input. That's all I'm saying. A lot more love and passion out than you guys realize for our community.
Commissioner George?
I also feel like when you're talking, you kind of already know the answers. You know the questions and you already know the answers. You just said it all right there. Well, we need to know this and this and this and this and this. And here's some answers we already know. So, well, why do we need to spend $60,000 when you already know the questions to ask? I mean, you have a team. You guys are the professionals that we hire and we pay for as a city. I feel like you guys are already the ones being paid to do this. So that's where I'm at, and I agree again with what Mark said.
I appreciate that. Our department has been very much focused on public information since its inception, and there's a big difference between public information and branding and pulling those stories out. So that's why we are looking for help, somebody who can dedicate their time to that research, to finding that information out, and helping us develop materials to then pay off on what that is. The research and the public engagement and getting community input is a huge portion of this proposal. It's the driving force behind anything that happens. And while I can't promise that the recommendation wouldn't be to make a change, it's based on research first. The goal is to get the research and find out what the community thinks and feels about West Fargo, and then make decisions based on that.
Okay, well, here's something else. Folkways just did their community survey, and we got a lot of information about that. They're going to be presenting on it later. Just throwing that out there.
Thank you. I have a question to ask of you. Commissioner Simmons has brought up some points with regard to the yards on Cheyenne and the process of a subcontractor doing that. Could you give us a little assessment of your opinion as to the positives or the negatives of the results of what we received there? I mean, you're the professional
Yep.
communications person.
Yep.
Commissioner Simmons is opinionated as to what he perceives it to be. You know, there's stickers on the doors, and that's about the only thing that you see with the yard. So would you please
Absolutely.
give a self-assessment on that?
Yeah, thank you, and I appreciate Commissioner Simmons bringing that up too. The difference between the yards project and this project is that the yards, we were short-sighted, and there's not staff dedicated to promoting and supporting the yards. It was a partnership through the business association, the city in terms of helping to get it developed, and then the Convention and Visitors Bureau. So I think the process was good. That vendor actually explained to us a little later on that the process that they went through for that was very abbreviated because the amount of money we spent was low. 15,000 is not a lot when it comes to branding and research and development. So I think, I'm not saying that we should have spent more, but I think we should have had we should have looked ahead to understand who would be assigned with supporting this brand and making sure it's implemented and maintaining it and measuring it. So that's I think the organization that did it was great. I think it was very helpful to have an outside force in there looking at things, drawing out key insights. There was moments where I wanted to make another change or go back to the drawing board, and as experts, they were able to help guide me on when it's a good time to make a change and when it's a good time to trust the insight and move forward. So I think the process was good. It was just the implementation that didn't go well. And that's why that was, besides the community engagement, that was a big portion of what I wanted to see from these organizations was support for the implementation stage so that my department is ready to implement, maintain, and measure it.
So is your summary then that in your assessment for the dollars we invested, for the scope of the work that we presented to the contractor, they delivered?
Yes.
Okay. I wanted to hear. All right. Anything else? Then I agree with Commissioner Simmons. We should have asked for more because it's anemic, you know, and we're all aware of that. I mean, that's not any news to anybody up here or to you as a professional. Commissioners? Any additional questions of Ms. Richard?
I would make a motion to approve.
Commissioner Jurdovig moves to approve. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Olson seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve Chandler Links as a contract for the police branding professional services at the tune of $59,000, and forgive me, I can't. $475. $475, thank you, Commissioner. Is there any further discussion?
I'd like a roll call.
Commissioner Simmons, okay? That's fine. Is there any other discussion? All right. Commissioner Simmons is called for a roll call vote. Ms. George?
No.
Commissioner Olson?
Yes.
Commissioner Simmons?
No.
Commissioner Jurdovig?
Yes.
Dardis votes yes.
Thank you.
Item number 6 is a project number 1327, Water and Sewer Improvement District, Water Distribution Loop at 9th Street Northwest. Dustin Scott, City Engineer for the City of West Fargo, is looking for an actionable item to approve the resolution accepting bids and to award a contract on this 1327. Mr. Scott.
Good evening. Thank you, Commissioner President Dardis and members of the Commission. Well, at the direction of the City Commission, we held a virtual bid opening on July 22nd where we had 4 proposals for the project number 1327. This is our water distribution project on the west side of town from Main Avenue up to the BNSF railroad tracks. The results of that bid opening were presented to the city's review committee on July 27th, who voted unanimously to recommend awarding a contract to Master Construction for their low bid of $774,481. There's a lot of information in your packets, so at this point, I'll just pause and answer any questions you may have.
Thank you. Mr. Scott, is there Commissioners, any questions of Mr. Scott on this item? Again, Mr. Scott is asking us to approve the resolution accepting the bids and awarding the contract for project number 1327. Your thoughts, Commissioners?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Olson. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner George seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the Improvement District 1337 for the new water supply, sewage, street systems. I'm on the wrong one, all right. Project number 1327, Water and Sewer Improvement District, Water Distribution Loop, 9th Street Northwest. Been moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Item number 7 is an improvement district of 1337, new water supply, sewage system, street systems, and incidentals, Wilds 21st edition. Mr. Scott.
Thank you again, Commission President Dardis and members of the commission. Again, at the direction of the City Commission, we held a virtual bid opening on July 15th, where we did receive 7 proposals for district number 1337. This is for the Wilds 21st edition. I do want to make it clear, though, that this isn't to service the entire platted area of the Wilds 21st edition. This is to serve the first 2 portions or phases that the developer petitioned for. The results of the bid opening were presented to the city's review committee on July 27th, who voted unanimously to recommend awarding a contract to Dakota Underground for their low bid of $3,731,528.58. Again, a lot of detailed information provided in your packet. I will pause and answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. Commissioners, you have any questions? Okay.
I'd make a motion to approve.
Thank you, Commissioner Jurdevig. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Commissioner Olson seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the project number 1327 for the Water and Sewage Improvement District. Yeah, God, I did it again. 1337 for the new water supply for the Wilds 21st edition. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you. Item number 8 is project 1338, sanitary sewer system rehabilitation, replacement, and incidentals. Mr. Scott is looking for approved resolution accepting bids and award the contract. Mr. Scott.
Thank you again, Commission President Dardis and members of the commission. Again, at the direction of the City Commission, we did hold another virtual bid opening on July 22nd for project 1338. This is our sewer system rehabilitation, where we are going to go and work on 4 of our lift stations in the core part of town here. The bids resulted in 1 proposal for the general work and 2 proposals for the electrical work. The nature of the work here did require us to receive bids, proposals for general, mechanical, and electrical items. And so in this case, we had 1 contractor that submitted a bid for both general and electrical, and another contractor that submitted for electrical. So again, the results were presented to the city's review committee on July 27th, and they voted unanimously to recommend awarding contracts to CC Steel for the general portion of the work, and then John's Refrigeration and Electric for the electrical portion of the work. So again, just to be clear on this, we would be awarding and entering into 2 separate contracts for those books of work at all of these all 4 sites. I also will point out that with this particular bid, there were 4 alternates. Those alternates were, for the most part, for security type amenities onto the site, things like a fence and some other items there that were specific to each site. Public Works felt like it was time to beef up our security around those sites and get fences installed. So those were alternates. We are recommending awarding the contract based on awarding the alternates. Again, the detailed information is provided in the packet. So if there's any questions on this one, I'm ready to answer.
Commissioner Olson?
So, Mr. Scott, in the bid that CC Steel submitted, that $847,000 includes the 4 alternates? Just to be clear?
That's to be clear, yes.
Okay.
Yep. Yep, and I'm just going to scroll down to the bid tabulation here. Maybe I don't have that. So you can see that we've got alternates
A, B, yep.
A, B, C, and D. So you can see the bid for CC Steel on the base bid, 766 plus thousand, and then there's a bid for alternate A, B, C, and D. These 5 items right here make up that $840-some thousand. Their electrical bid here, $230,000. We are not recommending awarding that to CC Steel. We're recommending awarding the electrical contract to John's Refrigeration, which is over here, the 220 plus or minus thousand. So,
Thank you.
So the actual bids did come in higher than the engineer's estimate with this one?
yes, on this one, the bids did come in higher than our engineer's report. The engineer's report total cost was $1.24 million. The construction that was estimated within that report was $1 million. So as you can see here, taking the bids plus a 10% contingency, we're at about $1.175 million. Again, that's including a 10% contingency, just as we had contingencies built in the engineer's report. So we are over our estimate. Largely relating to, I believe there was about $80,000 to $90,000 of mobilization was one item that we were well off on. If the commission recalls, when we opened bids for downtown Cheyenne Street, that was a primary suspect there too. We just well underestimated the mobilization cost. Some of the other items are just material and labor related, so.
Was the contractor able to give you a reason why the mobilization is so high?
They're predominantly just the nature that there's 4 sites that they're going to be hopping around to. They're, not often going to provide much of an explanation unless you really start pushing it. We, after talking, the short conversation version was, well, there's four different sites. We're going to have crews over here. We got to go pick up from over there and come over to here, and just a lot of moving back and forth between sites. So.
CC Steel Limited has worked for us in the past.
Yes, most recently they did the work on a sewer project. It was called the Geller's Addition Sewer. Basically, the commercial development between Main Avenue and Brookwood Trailer Park. There was a sewer rehabilitation job we did there, and it included some work along right at the 9th Street and 1st Avenue intersection. If the commission recalls, back in 2018, I believe, we had that intersection closed down where they were tying onto some force mains, so on and so forth. Prior to that, they've done work. They rehabilitated our big, large regional sanitary sewer lift stations, SA 40 and SA 29, on the south side of town. The other project they've done for us is the storm sewer lift station on Cheyenne Street, District 4060. That was back in 2017. So yes, they've done a few projects for us in the last 5 years or so.
The reason I bring that up is you're well aware that we've had a number of complaints about finishing the project on 4060, seeding and hydro seeding and all of those types of things. I know that several of us commissioners were contacted again today with regard to that, and Mr. Shockley addressed the issue as to what the city can do for making contractors accountable and the like. If we sign this contract, I'd like to make them well aware that we have citizens that were not happy that they did not complete their work, and they didn't, and that the citizens paid for the work themselves. And I think that should be noted to them, and it's because it's certainly in the back of my mind.
Absolutely.
Okay?
Will do.
Commissioners, we're on 1337. What's your pleasure?
38.
Did I do it again? 1338.
He's got to keep it going.
There's got to be space between these lines, Emily. My sincere apologies, folks. Jeez. 1338. Commissioner.
Maybe not to go back to that, but I'm unaware of any of the calls today.
Okay, you
What-
didn't get one.
I didn't get one, so what was
It's in
the-
regard to 4060, when the outfall came from the west side to the east side, where a resident had agreed to an easement with us that was not seeded, and they didn't bring it back to original condition. They took their cedars out there, and it was very rough and all. And then we had, because that resident was upset, he then hired a private contractor to come out and do it, so it was acceptable.
Before we could get to it? Or, I mean,
There was
the
a lot of
staff agree?
dialogue between
Okay,
Moore
so-
Engineering and trying to get the contractor to come back, with my understanding. Well, I shouldn't be answering the question. Mr. Scott?
Well, thank you, Commissioner President Dardis. Commissioner Simmons, I do recall that there were certainly issues brought forward to us. I do recall that at the time, Moore Engineering was coordinating some solutions there. I don't recall exactly the timing of when options were presented versus when the owner decided to hire a contractor. I wasn't intimately involved with that particular process, so I wouldn't want to say one way
We're
or
going
the other,
back though quite a while, right? This isn't nothing.
4060?
Yeah, okay. I-
3 years?
I wasn't aware that that somebody didn't, I guess, go back, or maybe I was, I just,
Yeah, I would certainly have to go back and just check the records and see where, because that sort of stuff does happen, especially when you're working along existing neighborhoods, in the existing properties, and oftentimes we will, even if the prime contractor will not come back, the city will look for options to either hire a subcontractor to come out and do something there. But in this particular case, I do recall that Moore Engineering was coordinating those solutions with the owner, and so that's where I don't recall exactly what ended up there.
The owner become frustrated and just executed it himself because he wasn't going to wait any longer. Just the point I wanted to make is that when we have issues like that and we have history, I would very much like that they're reminded about those types of things.
Absolutely.
That it's on our radar, because the job's not done till the job is done.
Understood.
Is there any discussion on 1338?
I'll make a motion to approve.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Olson, it's been moved and seconded to approve 1338, sanitary sewer system rehabilitation, replacement, and incidentals, as presented by Mr. Scott. The motion is to approve the resolution accepting the bids and award the contract. Is there any further discussion? Commissioner George?
With that motion, do we want to put the mayor's comments into it? Because I think he had a good idea there.
Thank you.
I would agree with that.
Mr. Scott, would you please, or Emily, in the minutes, would you please acknowledge that the contractor, that be addressed with the contractor? We have a motion and a second. Further discussion? All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, Mr. Scott.
Thank you.
Item number 9 on the regular agenda is the approval of the West Fargo Fire Chief to prepare a contract for the new fire station. We'll call on our Fire Chief, Mr. Dan Fuller, City of West Fargo. Good evening, Chief.
Good evening, Commission President Dardis and Commissioners. Tonight we have just a request to move forward with preparing a contract. Just some background of where we're at. This is for construction management services, or construction management advisor services. We received 7 RFQs for our request from the construction community. We had initially gone through a first review of all 7 applicants, went back on the quality of the RFQ, their fees, their local project experience and project experience here within West Fargo. We selected 4 to interview. Those were CPMI, Kraus Anderson, McGough, and construction engineers. We held those interviews last Wednesday here in this room in the morning. And per North Dakota Century Code, there is a very specific process to follow in terms of who's on that review committee and the score sheets that have to be kept, and we met all those criteria. Kraus Anderson came out as the one company that we were going to recommend to the commission to move forward with, but we need your permission to go ahead and get the contract solicited. And the process for the next 2 weeks is going to be that we'll get the contract back. We have our architectural firm, and we actually have a member of our architectural team, Mr. Chris Thomas, here with us today from EAPC. They're going to review it. We'll review it as the city, and then we'll send it over to Mr. Shockley for legal review. And hopefully, if we can wrap that up with a bow, we'll be back here on the 16th for final approval of that contract. Any questions?
Thank you, Chief. Questions for the Chief? It was interesting to be a part of that interview process with these very professional firms. I was traveling west last weekend, and I pulled up on one of their big job sites in the west to see whether or not their job sites were kept as clean and the like, and that they were, and it was a great job site. They did a nice job. Commissioners?
Make a motion to approve?
Thank you, Commissioner George. Is there a second, please?
Second.
Second is by?
Pick one.
One of you, both, I couldn't tell me. Commissioner Simmons, seconds.
We'll both take the gold.
It's been then moved and second for the approval of the West Fargo Fire Chief to prepare a contract for his new fire station. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you, sir.
Item number 10 is the presentation of the library community-wide survey results by Folkways. We have Carissa Hansen, the library director for the city of West Fargo, with us this evening.
Good evening, Commission President Dardis and Commissioners. Tonight I am excited to present to you the results of the community-wide survey that we conducted last spring in partnership with Folkways, and you'll recall that we undertook this project to better understand the needs and goals and interests and values of the West Fargo community so that we could build library services based on those. And so I'm going to turn it over to Joe Burgum of Folkways to discuss the results, and then we'll end with me talking about some major themes that came out of those results that the library could address, and then we'll take any questions.
Good evening, Mr. Burgum. Welcome.
Good evening. Great to be here with all of you. Thanks for taking the time to learn about our findings from the work that's been conducted over the last year with the West Fargo Public Library. I do want to give credit to Simone Y. and Leslie Bugle, who have been working on this project with me but are unable to be here this evening. So as we kick off, just want to review a timeline of the work at hand. We'll go through all the deliverables and the work that we've been working on over the last year, but you can see that it's about a year of work that we've been undertaking, working on being dynamic with the community as well as public health to ensure that we can get the best response from the community as it relates to informing the strategy that Chris and her team are building at the West Fargo Public Library. So the first thing I want to talk about in our work is the persona building. So we use a process called human-centered design. We believe that every project needs to start with understanding the community itself. So that's conversations, interviews, looking for those pain points and problems that community members are having. When we build out personas, what it allows us to do is really create stories, individuals, then staff can use to solve problems. So instead of anecdotal information, we're able to really say, nope, this is a pain point that we heard and we can identify it with an individual. So these were the 5 personas that we built out of about 15 out of 20 interviews that we conducted. So we worked on that in October. As we moved into November, we started thinking about, sorry, my cursor, the inverted on the roller here, non-user personas. So thinking about individuals who don't identify as going to the library. How do we understand what people are thinking about? It's sort of like, how do you find folks that don't floss their teeth? It's not really a group people identify with. And so we had a lot of work to really find folks that are not going to the library to try to better understand their perspective. What are they thinking about within the community? This was really important because it helped us inform the survey that was conducted this spring, which the goal was really to better understand what is the general public thinking about when they think about the public library. In December, we worked with library staff to conduct a user experience workshop. And so what we did is we convened digitally and we took these personas and started thinking about what are the problems these individuals have and what solutions might be able to come forward to solve their needs. A lot of really great ideas came forward from this workshop that I know that the library team is thinking about, an example of how those personas get put into play right away. How do we really think about the individuals that we're serving and what their problems are? As we came into January, we conducted an events audit. We reviewed all of the events from 2019, interviewed staff working on events, and then provided a set of recommendations. I have to say, it is really, really impressive what the West Fargo Public Library team is doing when it comes to community programming. The number of events being conducted is outstanding. The quality is really high, and our recommendations really came down to sort of good to great opportunities. Thinking about how do you improve marketing, messaging, feedback, and some systems improvements from a technical standpoint that will allow that team to be able to do even more events with the folks they have in place. So this brings us sort of the bulk of the work and the findings for all of you to hear today. So in April, we started with the survey live into the community. I'm really pleased with the number of responses that we had. There were 856 total responses, and cleaning that up based on geography and qualifiers, that ended with about 776 individuals that filled out the survey. Really remarkable and really fantastic that we had 143 student responses, those under the age of 18. That is not a common thing for a survey like this. And so I think as you're thinking about the vision of West Fargo, the engagement from youth is so critical. If youth can see themselves here in West Fargo, there's a bright future for this community, and this type of engagement is really paramount to being able to make sure that youth are heard. So of that, 633 were over the ages of 18. So we'll do a little bit of breakdown of the responses. So as mentioned, the 18 under and over breakup there, and you can see the distribution over the quadrants. This correlates really well to the age spread of West Fargo, average age being about 33 years old. So it was good to see that we had enough respondents of the survey to start getting some of that baseline matching with the demographics of the community. So looking at responses by area as well. So we worked on creating 9 distinct quadrants within the community of West Fargo in the service area of the public library. Again, this also very closely matches the density distribution by neighborhood. So this helped us really inform that we felt we had a good data set that those two things lined up. So you can see that the highest segment of people live closest to the West Fargo Library that responded. That makes sense. They're coming into the library. They knew about that it was going on, and a good spread there. So next, looking at the respondents, we asked people to identify into 3 different categories. Yes, you go to the library. Yes, you go to the library not frequently, and no. Users, sometimes users, and non-users of the library. A third of folks that responded to the survey are coming regularly, and the other 2/3 fell into that category of non-regular user or have not been to the library. So when we look at kind of the breakdown of that, how people identify with usership by age, 35 to 44, we had the lowest percentage of non-users, so meaning those individuals were the most likely to be at the library. In between, same for 65 to 74, the highest percentage of regular users. When we look at the neighborhoods, and I apologize, I don't have a map breakdown here, but areas 2, 3, and 5 had high percentages of folks that were regular users, and then areas 1 and 6 have the highest percentage of non-users of the library. Also, we saw a high percentage of retirees and those that were unemployed using the library services. I think this is a real testament to the public service that a public library is, as well as individuals with children, particularly those with more than 1 children, were much more likely to be visitors of the library. So we'll dive in now to affinity statements. So we really wanted to spend time thinking about public sentiment when it came to the library in West Fargo and how can that inform public projects. And so we'll go over 3 public sentiment questions that we asked. These we were simply presenting a statement to respondents of the survey and asking them to identify as do you strongly agree, somewhat agree, neither agree or disagree, somewhat disagree, or strongly disagree. So those 5 options. So the first question we asked was, the West Fargo Public Library is adding value to the greater West Fargo community. Tremendous response here. and able to see those that strongly agree and somewhat agree. So either 90% of respondents felt that the West Fargo Public Library is adding value to the community. So taking a look at that, we did a breakdown by income, as well as different areas to see, kind of outliers or any other information. So Area 3 had the greatest percentage of individuals that said they strongly agree, and Area 1 was the most apathetic, so the least. Also found that individuals between the household incomes between $25,000 and $50,000 had a very high affinity for the library. When we look at that by age, we saw that those 65 and up had a very strong affinity with the library, as well as those between the ages of 25 and 34. The next affinity question that we asked was, the West Fargo Public Library is in need of upgraded facilities. So you can see here a breakdown of the overall responses. 75% of people agreed or strongly agreed that the facilities does need to be improved. When we looked at that by non-users, we saw that there was a greater sense of low disagreement, so non-users didn't think that it not needed to be upgraded, but a high level of apathy, which makes sense. If you're not going to the library, you don't really have an opinion perhaps on the facilities. But when we look at infrequent users, folks that had been to the library, you see there that again, over 70% would agree or somewhat agree that the facility does need to be upgraded. When we look at respondent areas here, we see that Zone 6 had a very high response, and Zone 1 had a smaller, 60% still agreed, but less than. Again, by age, we found that those between the ages of 35 and 44 agreed the most that the facility needed to be upgraded, and those between the ages of 55 and 65 agreed less. When we look at this and in conversations we're having with Carissa is really starting to be able to identify groups and audiences that we can think about are champions for the library, or groups that perhaps need a greater invitation. Why is it that those between the age 54 and 64 are not using the library when we know that there are many of them that find it valuable? So it starts to inform strategy of outreach, communication, program development, and thinking about if there is to be a building built, perhaps, what work needs to be done in terms of engaging the community to ensure they understand the value. So the final statement was the Affinity Statement. I'm willing to financially support services that benefit others, even if I may not personally benefit. So here we saw that there was a high percentage of residents in West Fargo that back public projects. I think that's our understanding here, that people, if they see the value in something, even if they themselves are not going to it, believe in the public benefit for the community. Again, when we look at the age breakdown between 19 and 24, we had the highest percentage of somewhat agree, somewhat strongly agree. And then between the ages of 55 and 64, we had the highest percentage of disagree, still only about 12%. Area 6 had the highest percentage of people who strongly agree. So it was interesting looking at some of these. We looked at the map to look at some of these neighborhoods to start asking ourselves, okay, why does this area feel so strongly? And I think that'll get into some of our recommendations here. So some other things that we wanted to learn from the community was a perspective on transit time. We asked people to define what is a trip or a reasonable trip look like, convenient distance. And so 51% of residents in West Fargo believe that's a 5 to 10 minute drive. So when we think about neighborhood development, walkable places, that's a contributing factor in terms of where people will go. Of course, those of you that have family or kids, folks with children had a narrower range of what was a convenient trip or willing to drive, and people in Area 6 were willing to drive farther, which makes sense based on amenities that they have. Here's a breakdown of those with children, without children, just to see a little bit of that separation in terms of what is a convenient trip and how far someone is willing to drive. Asking people about where they choose to live and work based on driving and access to things. So I think the big takeaway here, and this is something that the library team had already been working on, but I think a real emphasis in mobile programming. When we think about access to programming and people's desire to be within adjacency of that, the ability to have a facility that can serve all residents within 5 to 10 minutes is not possible, of course. But the mobile programming the library is doing is making a huge difference to be able to reach people where they're at and to be able to move dynamically within the community. So as I touched on earlier, we think this research and survey really helps us identify sort of biggest advocates for the public library and groups to connect with. Those over the age of 65, that demographic of 35 to 44, neighborhood zones 3 and 6, those household income between $25,000 and $50,000, and then women were all large advocates for the library based on our findings. Areas that need advocacy or an invitation, I would say, to the story of the library, those other age groups, as mentioned, best reached by Facebook, radio, television, email, newsletters, and then men. We had very few men respond to the survey, which was interesting despite the amount of outreach that we did. Another thing that we did was open-ended questions. So these open-ended responses helped us understand how do West Fargoans feel about events, community, where are they going, how do they spend their free time. All these questions, open-ended responses have been shared with library staff to be able to help them continue to understand how to better serve the community. Here's some interesting word clouds. So this is interest in learning. The darker and the larger, the more folks responded. So it's interesting just seeing thematics across age and other backgrounds in terms of what people are interested in. I'd say the community of West Fargo is eager to learn. There's definitely a growth mindset here and folks that are keen on continuing to have access. Regular attending activities. You can see here that theater performances, church, sporting events, cruise nights, farmers markets, street fairs, all things that people mentioned as things that they enjoy attending. So overall, as mentioned, this is a really solid book of information. Chris is going to come up and talk about how they're already starting to implement this, but this level of research is here to really help understand how to better serve members of the community who are not currently using the library. As we built out the personas and the other parts of our work, those were tools to better understand how do we serve those that are already coming to the library. But with this survey response, we can start to understand where are those groups in the community that need more outreach, that invitation to come and participate in the library. So I'll invite Chris up, and she's going to share more about what the library team's been using this information for and how they're developing programming. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Berger.
Thanks, Joe. So next, I just want to talk about some of the prominent themes that came out of our review of all of the information that we have at our disposal through this project and other sources. And with all of this information, we've been able to identify an initial list of needs that we as a library think that we are probably well suited to address. And then next, we're going to be working with staff and the library board to determine what among those to prioritize in the coming years. And we aren't necessarily going to be able to do all of them, but we'll set goals around some of these areas and we'll prioritize them and design programs and services around them. And so I'm really excited, and I think that a lot of these needs aren't probably the library of a lot of people's childhood. I think these are exciting. These are some new and progressive ways that we can provide service to the community. So the first one of those that I want to highlight, one theme that came out is this: everybody needs services and resources in which they see themselves in order to feel welcome and take full advantage of what is available at the library, especially those people facing barriers. So the library has historically served many new Americans, and we knew that going into the project, but one thing that we wanted to think about was how can we serve them more purposefully? And so through the interviews and the survey that Folkways conducted, we discovered some of the ways that we could make the library more inclusive. And if we are looking back to our personas that were devised through the interviews, and we look at our Halima persona, one of, I think, the pain points that she brought forward highlight this really well. Halima would like to invite more of her family and community members to the library, but they don't think there's anything there for them. Though she uses online resources, she doesn't often check out books for herself or her kids because they are not in her first language. And on top of this, survey respondents talked about a desire to learn about other cultures as well. So I think the library is full of potential to really be a connection point in the community for education and representation of multiple cultures. Next, parents need services for their families in close and convenient locations. We're talking 5 to 10 minutes or less in order to maximize resources available to them. And certainly tonight you saw the survey results that demonstrated that. So those results, in conjunction with interviews, strongly support library efforts to bring services directly to kids and parents in the community. And I think Andrea's pain point up here encapsulates the need for that mobile outreach really well. And it makes sense. Nearly 9% of West Fargo's population is under the age of 5, which is a lot. Quarter of the population is under the age of 18. And we saw that the more children that families have, the more likely they are to be regular library users. And parents are looking to the library as a way to supplement their children's learning. They're looking at it as a way, as a tool, I should say, to get their kids engaged in learning, get them excited about learning, and have positive relationships with learning and reading. And the library is an affordable solution for them to do that. We saw that time and time again through all the results. But to do that, we have to meet them where they are. And we're far away from a lot of them, our building, at least physically. So in order to make the library more convenient, we have to meet them where they are through mobile programming, because they're trying to meet a lot of different needs with limited resources and time. Next, parents and children birth to age 5 need a way to develop literacy and social skills in order to ensure success in kindergarten and beyond. Survey respondents ranked early childhood education as a top investment in West Fargo. Again, not surprising given how many children between the ages of 0 and 5 there are, and because that before kindergarten time is really a critical years in a child's life, because it's at that time that the foundation is really set for social experiences and word recognition and number recognition and all of that. And I think the other thing to keep in mind too with this is that there's no universal preschool education in North Dakota. And it's only just recently, actually, I saw that some statewide funding for pre-K education for 4-year-olds will become available. So like tuition-free options for early childhood education are still really limited, especially when you're looking at that 0 to 3 age bracket. And because of our staff expertise at the library, we're uniquely positioned to put our resources to work on behalf of the community in this area. And it's already a strength that we have. In 2020, I think about 40% of our programs were early literacy programs. But again, that mobile outreach piece of it is going to be extremely important because many kids and caretakers can't easily get to the library building. Next, teens need additional support outside of school to develop personal interest, build life skills, and have real-world experiences in order to be confident and prepared for their futures. We definitely saw this come through in the youth survey for sure. And I am also knowledgeable about this because I've been able to be a representative on the school district's Equity and Inclusion Task Force this year. So I've learned a lot about how the schools are working really hard to get students choice ready. In other words, ready for their futures. So they're working to help students explore their interests, learn about options after they're done with school, have real world experiences out in the community is something that they're really focused on. But what keeps coming up time and time again is that school resources are just limited. So they're looking to tap community partners and experts to really foster this. And I included the graph on the right because this is the ethnic distribution of respondents to our youth survey. So you can see it's quite a lot more diverse than the responses to the adult survey, but it makes sense because the breakdown of students in the West Fargo School District, it is a lot more diverse than West Fargo as a whole, but I think that shows you that West Fargo is going to continue to change and diversify, and that whole piece about people needing to see themselves and resources available is going to become even more important. Finally, how about adults? So in the adult survey, we asked questions like, what do you do with your free time? Is there anything that you're interested in learning about? What kind of skills do you want to develop? If you had 2 hours of unrestricted free time, what would you do with it? So we asked things like that. And what came out of it, some of the major themes were these. Adults need ways to reduce stress, make informed life decisions, and take care of themselves in order to improve personal well-being. A lot of people talked about, I want to get better at taking care of me. I want to get more organized. I want to learn about my health. I want to learn about how to make good financial decisions. I want to have good access to things to read. Another thing that came out is adults need ways to learn new things in order to expand their horizons on limited budgets. Interestingly, a strong aspiration to read and a love of physical books specifically was a finding of the survey, and reading was actually the most frequently put response to the questions about free time, which was interesting. So there's definitely a learning and reading culture in West Fargo that's really strong. And finally, adults need an outlet to learn hands-on arts and crafting skills to be more self-sufficient and express themselves, but they don't necessarily have those skills, tools, or teachers to help them learn on their own. So a lot of people were interested in developing practical, do-it-yourself type skills to be self-sufficient and save money, but also just to have a creative outlet. Finally, I am always looking for ways throughout this project and just other facets of what we do at the library to make sure that we're aligned with the West Fargo 2.0 plan and the ways that we can work to advance our citywide goals. And I thought it was interesting because I saw a lot of overlap between the survey results that we gathered and some of the market segments that were brought up in the 2.0 plan. And the 2.0 plan talks about West Fargo being a really child-centered community. People are focused on building a better life. There's a strong reading culture, strong interest in cultural activities, and do-it-yourself and crafting are specifically mentioned. Another component of the 2.0 plan that stood out to me in relation to our project is family orientation, and curating a community that has child-friendly amenities will be important. So I think you can really easily see the market segments outlined in the 2.0 plan matching the responses in the community survey. So I think one that tells us we're right on track with our focus areas that we've identified. We got a good survey sample. And I think number two, it shows us that we can very easily align our goals with the 2.0 plan. Finally, some portions in the 2.0 plan mention the library specifically, but there are some aspects and connections to being made between the needs that we identified in our project with Folkways in the 2.0 plan, where the library isn't specifically mentioned. And so these are some areas where myself and staff see ways that the library board and the city commission could work together to really leverage the library to advance citywide goals. So the 2.0 plan talks about this increased mix of uses within neighborhoods, and it says, an ideal mix would allow residents to meet all of their daily needs within a short walking distance. So again, that extending residents' access to library services through outreach and satellite locations is really a key way to advance this goal in the 2.0 plan. And then the other one that I want to highlight, developing the West Fargo Creative Spaces Initiative. The plan talks about co-working spaces and maker spaces and downtown and cultural centers. And in many cities, that's the downtown public library, because the public library is really a connection point for all of those things that's available to all residents. So the library has already been a key player in the creative environment in West Fargo and a key contributor to arts and cultural opportunities in the city. And I think it's no secret that we need to work towards a change in our facility in the coming years to fully realize a goal like this, but the library is a real opportunity to draw in community members of all ages and backgrounds through an intentional space to learn and make and create. And that is all we have, but I just want to end by saying a big thanks to the City Commission for allowing us to do this project. We have such rich information to understand West Fargo, so I think that we're really well positioned to move forward and be focused and really prioritize, and I think that's a great thing. And so I feel very grateful to all of you for allowing us to do this project, and so now we'll just open it up for questions.
Thank you, Mrs. Hanson. Questions for Mrs. Hanson?
I probably have,
Commissioner Simmons?
thank you. I probably have one more for Joe. Carissa, if anything, Joe? You've done these, I'm assuming, in the past, correct, to other organizations such as libraries, correct?
We've done other community outreach surveys, but this is the first time we've worked directly with the public library system.
Okay, so I noticed how many, the number of respondents was less than 1,000, and we have how many, 40, what do we have for citizens?
41 to 43.
41 to 42,000. What were you expecting? You know, for a general.
Yeah.
What's
We were really pleased with the number of responses. I think that level, that percentage, like I said, it's hard to sometimes say that it's a number of responses that makes the data set qualified. The fact that we had enough to hit on those distributions of population by age, by geography, those things sort of gave us a seal to say this number of responses is statistically relevant. And so we felt really good about that. I think the difference in getting more surveys often comes down to budget. In terms of the ability to spend more on marketing and storytelling in order to get the word out. And so we felt really good about the number of responses in that survey.
Okay, I just noticed some of them, like, they were like less than 5%, 2% of, that's not very many respondents in one category. Especially the 19 to 24, that was really low. I'm assuming they're just all probably busy doing their jobs, or?
Yeah,
It just seemed, I guess I'm not an expert in this, so I don't know. To me, I mean, so if that's what you say it is, I'm fine with that. I just look low to me.
Yeah, no, absolutely. No, it's a good question. I mean, I think we're always thinking about how do we ensure that the data is statistically relevant?
Right.
You know, how can we draw insights from that? And so I think that's where really with any sort of public survey, the intent isn't to have it be a yes/no vote for all of you to make a decision. It's a data set to help inform a strategy that we can then move forward on. And so in working with Carissa and having this is we feel really good about the response information that's qualified to then inform the strategy. We would never recommend going to the public with a survey like this to say, do you want a new building or not? It's a loaded question. There's a lot to unpack behind that. That's where we start to gather that sort of sentiment to then be able to say, okay, this can inform a strategy to then say, hey, as elected leaders, how do you make a decision with the best information you have at hand?
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Please.
I would just say in closing, having worked with the library system here, as West Fargo continues to grow and think about how do you deliver services, how do you provide quality of life to residents, most people hope the trash comes on time and water gets to the house. They're not necessarily thinking about cities as a differentiator, but I think the public library is a really unique opportunity because it is part of the city. And it is an amazing chance to really differentiate the community and provide a really high quality of life to individuals through public services. And Chris and the team here are doing a fantastic job and I think are thinking really creatively into the future. Just like cities, the library system in this process has developed a strategic plan moving forward, and to be able to think about, you can serve an individual at age 5 and you might serve them again when they have their own children. And so what is that opportunity to really create an impact on an individual's life? So I just have to say it's a shining star in the community here of West Fargo, but I think it might go unnoticed. So I hope there's an opportunity to celebrate the library and as an arm of the city, the work that it's doing to improve people's lives.
Thank you. Any additional questions for Mr. Burgum or Mrs. Hanson? All right. This is just a presentation of the library's community-wide survey results. This is not really an actionable item for this evening. Item number 11 is to the preliminary 2022 budget. Mrs. Fisk, City Administrator.
Thank you, President Dardis and Commissioners. I come before you with a budget, and when I was here last time, we had our mill levy at 5.2. We thought we had exhausted all areas that we were able to reduce that down any further, considering the levies that we've given over the last few years. But we were able to find a couple different areas that we could reduce and additional revenues that we could bring in. And so I'm presenting you with an overall budget, all city funds and library, of 4.5. Last time it was 5.2, but now we're at 4.5. So with that, I just want to say that the proposed budget would raise property taxes $20.25 for every $100,000 of a residential property's value. Our median average price of a home is $254,000. That would equate to an increase of $51.43. The total increase in the city's general fund was $1,623,728. These increases are due to support services like fire, police, snowplows, municipal court, engineering, other functions, and then there's also library in their own fund. The approval of the preliminary budget tonight will freeze all expenditures that are funded through property tax. So water, sewer funds, those types of things we don't have to finalize, but anything that's funded with tax dollars freezes tonight, and then we send it off to the county so that the consolidated tax statements can be sent out to the public. Let me see. We have a 4.5% increase in expenses over 2021, which is lower than the 5.4% inflation rate that we're experiencing right now. 15% of these expenses are covered with property taxes, while the other 85% comes from other funding sources such as public utilities, service charges, franchise fees, special assessments, intergovernmental funds, those types of items. We also, in this budget, still have a plan to use $1 million in reserve funds, which is down from 2021 of $1,350,000. The increase in the funding needs for 2022 represents a significant investment in public safety for the community of West Fargo. It includes hiring 3 full-time firefighters to address the increased calls for service, which rose 300% from 2017 to 2020, with the addition of the fire department providing emergency EMT services, which is greatly needed by our community. It also includes a crime analyst for the police. This position will evaluate crime data to help the department focus their efforts on high crime areas, high-risk offenders, and repeat victims. It also supports an increase in the infrastructure that will need to be maintained and provide municipal services to the residential and commercial units that are added each year. If you look in your book, you will see the number of lane miles, the number of neighborhoods, all of that's added. All that requires maintenance, all that requires assistance, and our Public Works Department and all of our departments in the city are doing a phenomenal job and doing it with very little. So with that, as you've had a chance to look through the budget, I would take any questions. I just want to note that the final budget hearing will be set for September 20th, and that will go out in the notice with, from the county.
Thank you, Mrs. Fisk. Commissioners, questions? Comments?
Are we voting on something here?
You need to, through discussion, at the end, we'll need a vote of approval for the preliminary budget.
At the end of this one, Tina, or?
Yep. Because we have to have this to the county.
Right, but I'm saying, don't we have to listen to the library budget?
Oh,
first?
I'm sorry. Yes, I'm so sorry. Thank you for reminding me. I was just presenting, and I threw in facts that involve the library, but the library board will come up here and discuss their budget. Then I will come back up and talk to all of you. Sorry. Thank you, Mark.
Let's clarify first the comments you just made.
Okay.
About this is an actionable item. We're approving the preliminary budget after your various meetings with department heads. This does not mean that the discussions are over with regard to commissioners?
Correct. President Dardis, from this point, what this will do, as I said, is freeze our total expenses that we can have in these tax levied funds. Now, if there are other items that come up and you want to reduce, at this point, what I would need from you is tell me where you want me to cut, because between the assistant administrator, Tim Solberg, Jim Larson, and all the other department heads, we truly have brought you a truly lean budget. So I would need directive of exactly where you want me to cut. Because at some things, if we take them out, that's going to reduce services. So I would love that directive if that's what you want when I come back up. I'll let the library board come up here and speak, and then I will come back for more questions.
Just one comment, just so we're clear that.
Commissioner Olson.
That you say we can only cut. What you means is like if we have a budget set for Department XYZ, we can't increase their budget after this point. We can only decrease it.
Absolutely correct, Commissioner Olson. Even if we found another revenue source, we cannot increase expenses in any of those tax levied funds.
Okay, thank you.
Good evening. Please state your name.
Yep, I'm Dr. Leanne Hansen, and I am most recently nominated the president of the library board and a new member of the library board as well.
Welcome, Dr. Hansen.
Thank you. So I am here, and I will not read the whole statement to But as I got caught up on the budget for the library, it was noted, and I know I'm at the end, here it is. It was noted that in 2018 that we reduced the library's mill levy, and we began operating out of a portion of our reserve. But within the 21 and 22, we had some offset, but to maintain our services, we would really need to look at a 1.1 mils increase within our budget area. And I think what I've been just, in the month I've been on the board, what I've been just tremendously pleased with as a community member, the outreach that the library has had. And that it's not the library, and I think Carissa had mentioned it earlier, it's not the library that I went to here in West Fargo when I grew up in West Fargo. We are reaching out to families, we're reaching out to kids, and I'm in the education field, and I have a passion to reach out to our community and reach our kids. And we need to maintain the programming that Carissa and her staff have implemented, because I think it's so important. You know, some of the great things, you know, the Little Red Reading Bus is amazing, and we're really reaching out to the community, and we're getting families and we're getting kids interested in books, interested in other library activities. But with that programming, and I think other items too, we have 500 new library card holders. I mean, and to me, that's amazing that we're reaching that many more. Our circulation of physical items has surpassed 2019. And the library recorded twice as much summer program attendance in June of 2021 compared to pre-pandemic in 2019. So I am here, I can answer maybe some questions. I don't know if I can answer a lot of historical questions, but I can answer, you know, and I think speak eloquently about what the library is doing. I think we're doing a wonderful job of reaching our community, reaching our kids, and reaching out to make sure that all people have access to the library. And we'd like to maintain and continue to look at services that will increase library services in our community.
Thank you, Dr. Hanson.
Yep.
Questions, comments?
Just a quick comment. I just appreciate you really being here and speaking on behalf of the library. I think there is a section of the community that doesn't understand the services and what the library does for the community, so I appreciate you speaking.
Yeah, and it looks different maybe from what the parents that have kids right now did as a library, going to the library, and I think if we can continue the outreach, I think it's really important.
Commissioner Simmons.
Thank you, Mayor. I do have some questions, and Doctor, probably Chris is going to have to help you out.
Absolutely.
I have no problems with the library and obviously what you're doing. I think it's great. I do have, I'm kind of concerned about the payroll. And so I guess, Chris, if you could, because obviously that's part of the budget. And there were some changes made, I know, in March. And I'm wondering first of all, how many full-time employees do you have?
We have 12 full-time employees.
12
We have
full-time?
15 FTE in total.
So explain how you restructured and how that worked. Because I know your payroll obviously went up quite a bit in your pay scale. From what I see, I have here, it's.
When I started in my position, there was a definite need to retool and reorganize some positions in the library. And so we restructured and found a lot of efficiencies. Some positions needed to be eliminated, some positions needed to be revamped. And so some of that has taken place in the last couple of years. We were able to also add a position last year. And so just also that combined with just increasing staffing costs, just like any other department, contributed to that line. So
on your payroll portion, did you hire a consulting firm, or how did you determine, I guess, because I know you even changed the titles I saw on some of your employees. How did you determine, how did you determine their pay? How's that? How did you come up with that?
So we just go through same process as any other department. When any position is added or reviewed, it's just the same consulting service that is used citywide.
So you went through the city?
Yep. So we'd follow all the same city HR processes.
I didn't realize that. I thought you had your own.
Nope, completely the same. So we operate completely the same as any department.
So you worked with our, obviously, city administrator, you worked with
yes,
our
that's
people
correct.
on it?
Yep, that's correct.
Pardon?
Jenna?
Yep,
Jenna,
that's
you worked
correct.
with Jenna on that?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep, we function no differently than any other city department from an HR perspective. It's all the same. library employees are city employees, so they're all
And they
treated the same.
agreed with you then on those that everything was in line?
Yep. And where needed, I brought changes forward to the library board too. Yep.
Okay, Tina? You?
Yes, and I just want to clarify what Chris is saying. The library functions differently in some ways than our other departments. Our HR department helps the library. We go through them. We use the same, we're using the same MRA study group that we used when we did the salary study. But the library board determines what their job descriptions are, and then Carissa brings those forward to us, and Jenna goes and gets them graded. Then she takes them back to her board, and her board has the ability to approve or deny them. The city doesn't control that because they control their own finances and their own cash.
But we control the mill levy, obviously they're asking, so in essence, we do control that budget. Correct, John?
John Shockley, City Attorney.
Commissioner Simmons, you bring up, you're correct in that the library, the Attorney General determined the library board is much like an alter ego. The library board has control over the management of its employees and its budget and its cash, but the city commission controls the mill levy. So they can propose a budget, but it has to be constrained by what the city commission approves as a mill levy.
So I guess the only, and I'm not trying to say this badly, I'm just trying to say that it would be better to me in the future that when you give the raises, that we do know prior to that rather than after the fact. And I think in this case, we really didn't, you know, like when we do our budgets, our people, all of our departments, minus I believe you, it's built into the next year's budget. Yours isn't, right? You have to come and give your own. Is that correct? Am I understanding that right, or am I not explaining that right?
If I understand what you're saying, Commissioner Simmons, when now the library board is presenting their budget, and so they've set the salaries for next year. So,
But the one in March that was kind of done.
that was done as a budget amendment by the library board, and
And it didn't have to come to us, that's what you're saying, because it's a different setup.
yeah, I double-checked that with our city attorney, John Shockley, and he said, no, they can make those changes during the year because they're their funds to manage.
Which I guess I understand that, but then you're here tonight asking for a mill point too, and obviously, that's not that's to help with that payroll as well, it's operational, so it's for everything, is what I'm saying.
Yes, I do want to point out too that the changes made, only one of them was a staffing addition, which was brought forward in the budget last year. So there wasn't any new positions added. There were changes that had to be made from legacy positions that existed at the library in order to make them function well for the city and for us to actually be able to use them. There were changes that need to be made. Like I said, sometimes it resulted in we had to change somebody's job description. Sometimes it meant we had to eliminate a job. Sometimes it meant we needed to retool a couple of jobs and make a different job because there were just legacy issues with it. So we did have to make some of those choices as we went forward. Changes were brought forward to the library board. When there was a new position added, that of course was brought forward to the city commission and as part of our regular budget last year. So
When you referenced that new position, what was that position?
that was a children's services librarian position. Children's services, yep, which we didn't have previously.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, thanks.
Additional questions?
Just for the library?
Please, Commissioner, yes, for the library only.
I'm good with the library.
Dr. Hanson, or? No, thank you, ladies.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, commissioners. I am ready for any questions you have on the remainder of the budget.
Commissioner Jerdovich.
So I have a couple comments / questions, and the first question is, I'm not sure how to answer it, but I'd love an opinion. You know, last year we spent 1.3 million out of reserves to balance our budget. This year, the proposed budget is spending $1 million out of our reserves. As everybody knows, if you keep taking out of your reserves, sooner or later you don't have any. So you had provided some information to me that based off a question last week. And our cash reserves since 2015 have increased from about 19.8 million to, well, in 2020 it was 25.2 million.
Correct.
So they've been going up during this time, But it begs the question, what should our reserves be? And I realize that is kind of the impossible question to answer. But if we have a target, let's say our target is 25 million in reserves, and we're spending some out of our reserves, but we're staying roughly in that target zone, then the idea of spending some of our reserves to balance our budget doesn't concern me. But if our target is 30 million in reserves, and we're currently at 25, and we're balancing the budget with $1 million out of there, we're moving in the wrong direction. And so maybe the question is more to the rest of the commission than anybody else, but what should our reserves be in the city? Because if we don't have a goal or a target, we're kind of indiscriminately taking money out and putting money in, and just, it is what it is, and I'm not sure that's the right strategy.
Commissioner Jarovic, I did, after we had that conversation, and I don't have the number right in front of me, and I forgot to send it, I apologize, but I did look to see what Fargo carries for reserves, and they carry in excess of $100 million in their general fund for reserves.
Yeah, you did send that to me in email.
I did,
I
okay.
appreciate that. It was
Yep.
115 million.
That's what it was, yes.
So, that is certainly a benchmark.
Yeah.
So I'm not really looking for an answer, but I think it's a point that is important in the budgeting process, is to understand how big of an issue it is or isn't to be spending money out of our reserves.
Anytime that you have reserves and the amount of bonding that we have, the bonding agencies look at that very, very stringently, that it's important, and they do have somewhat of a formula, that it's X number, Jim, help me with this, isn't it X number of months that you can pay the bills? Or Tina, do you know that number? I recall when I had Moody's come in from Chicago and give me a tutorial, that was one of the specific things that they said. It is tied to that, Eric, as to what our monthly obligations are, and certainly what our bonding payments are, so.
President Dardis, I do know that when we meet with the bonding agencies, the finance director, myself, they look at not only that 6, 9 month, 1 year, but they also look at, with the high amount of debt we carry, that if we have a bad year and we don't have collections of special assessments, that we've got good funding available to cover those, because that supports our bond rate. If we get too low, if they feel we're spending money and not keeping enough put away, it will affect our bond rating. So that's just, I don't know what that end number is, but yes.
Commissioner Simmons.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll use the most scientific way, and ever since I started, Tina, you know this, and I encourage you all to do it. I call Mike, our bonding agent, and I always ask him the same question. How much do we have in there? Is it enough? How's our rate going to be on the next bond? And he's very smart at that and to figure that out. And so that's what I go by.
Well,
And he says, Commissioner Simmons, or you're sitting here, you're okay. You're going to be good. The next rate, and he's never failed yet. So we've got a good bonding agent.
well, and I know I'm asking a question where there isn't an answer,
Right,
but I think it's worth making the point and continuing the conversation.
Mm-hmm.
My second item is about the combined 4.5 mil increase with the library and the rest of the city. I'm actually fine with what the library is proposing. We are, in a way, giving them back the mills that we took away from them to force them to spend down their reserves for a couple of years, and I think it's the right thing to do. But as I told you on Friday, I'll vote tonight to support this because we're setting the maximum of 4.5. But I do believe that there are some areas that still can be saved. For example, we could stagger some of those hires and drop an entire mill pretty easily without giving up those people next year. And that does create a little bit of a hole a year down the road, because that's what we did last year.
And that amounted to $400,000 this
But
year.
it does give us a chance to allow the value of a mill to catch up and start covering some of that. So there are ways to cut this more. So I will vote to help, or to set this tonight, but I won't vote for 4.5 mils when we talk on September 20th, so, because I do think there's more room to be saved.
I would need consensus from the commission that you would want us to implement the budget by staggering employees, or any other changes that you want to reduce it. I'm going to need permission from the majority.
Well, the other thing we talked about is there are, whether it's travel, education, whether it's some of the technology spend, you know, I think there's some room there, or at least to provide the detailed breakdown of exactly, you know, what is the travel spend, not just a travel budget. And then the other one I had written down, I can't read my own handwriting. Oh, the other one, and it's, you know, I vote to support the rebranding efforts. We just talked about that not that long ago. But as it relates to the next step of the project, I would actually prefer that's not in the budget, and for it to, you know, once we've completed this first project, to come back with the plan, with the detail, with all of the items, so that we can see the real detail instead of just plugging in a number which very well might not be enough, or I would rather that be a budget amendment. So there's a number of ideas that I believe could cut another mill out of this pretty easily.
Thank you, Commissioner Jarovig. We had talked about that, and I talked with the Communications Department, and we agreed that taking that out and then just coming back with a request when you know what it is you're asking for is the best way. But even taking that money out, it's not going to change any of our mill levies, because that's being paid for with economic development sales tax. So we do plan on taking it out and making that a request that comes separately. So you'll see it change there, but it won't affect the mill levy.
In that particular case, but in some of the other stuff it will.
In some of the
If
other
you stagger
questions
the
I
P,
brought up.
yes.
Yeah, if you have other items that you want me to remove or change or
I don't know if
stagger.
you need a motion or not, or what you would like on that, but I'd also like.
Still in a discussion.
Yeah, so, I'm not done yet, I'm just.
Go ahead.
Brought that up, thank you, Mayor, but, I guess I'd like to see you just have a general, go back and, I realize you've cut as much as you can cut, and if you can't, then come back, but try, I think is kind of what I'm saying, just see where places are you can, maybe we could save a few dollars.
I definitely can go back, but I can honestly tell you that
Room to be squeezed out of there.
that this is a budget that isn't wants. There's no wants left in there. In fact, a lot of the needs are taken out. And the next places to cut are gonna be things that will affect services. So, and I can do that. We can go look for it. And that is fine. So I just need the directive of, where do you want it to end up? I don't even know where to go. Because I have to go now to departments and tell them, cut money out of your budget. I know you need that, but you can't do that.
Commissioner Olson.
Just a point to clarify now that this is out in the public on the economic development. And I don't know what's up pointed online, but under the memberships expenses, just could you explain why it went from $2,500 to $25,000? Why it's grouped in there?
I sure will. Over the course of the last couple of years, it kind of makes our budgets look strange. We've been trying to allocate expenses where they belong. Before, we had a lot of expenses that were being paid for out of, like, water and sewer that shouldn't have been paid out of water and sewer. They should have been paid out of the general fund. So we've been cleaning a lot of that up. This one in particular, the $25,000 was put in there because that's our anticipated membership to the Greater Fargo-Moorhead EDC. That caveat is there, but if it's dependent upon what the city of Fargo pays into Greater Fargo-Moorhead EDC, if there's, the motion made by commission was that theirs had to be 75,000 or greater in order for us to pay 25, and if it isn't, then we go back down to 15. So that's basically what that entire line item is meant for.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
So, for all the department heads that are sitting here looking at us, as well as the public, there has been numerous meetings going on. I carry the administrative portfolio. Commissioner Jurdevig is his secondary portfolio. All the commissioners are engaged and involved in this when you're dealing with money and the budget. So there's been some really good dialogue. There's been some good suggestions. There's been some pushback as to what we can do and what we can't do. I've been monitoring very closely recently the health issue that America is going to be continuing to experience with the variant and the like. And I'm very concerned about travel. We're going to send our employees to places unknown at this point in time for conferences and the like. So there's additional dollars, as we did in last year. Those dollars weren't spent. And there were times when department heads came back to us and we reallocated those dollars. And that was not a hard decision from the commissions. I think just about unanimously, we approved all of those types of things. But I think that there's also a discussion that needs to take place as we continue to move forward in 2021. And we all want to live our lives, but there's some changes that are developing again across the country. So that's why I wanted you, Mrs. Fisk, to clarify that this evening when we talk about approval of the preliminary budget, there is still additional discussions that's going to be going on with regard to how we approach that. Now, none of us have a crystal ball that we could tell what that might end up being. But, you know, those types of discussions need to take place, and we need to have a policy. You know, one of our fellow commissioners here is, due to the nature of what she does for a living, travels extensively. That's an exciting thing. That's a great thing with what Commissioner George does. That's part of her work. We need to be able to make some decisions on some of the things that we can control when it comes to conferences and travel. And conferences, in this day and age, if we didn't learn anything in the last year, it can be done remotely. It can be done electronically. It can be done online. So I'm going to tell you right straight out, I still feel that there's a lot of work that can be done in that area. So you asked for direction. That's one of them that, and I spent about 3.5 hours today on the budget again. And I concur with Commissioner Jurdovic that there's wants and there's needs, and you know, we're going to do everything that we need to provide the services to this community. We're not going to shortchange our taxpayers on services. But there are a few line items here that we still need to address. And I certainly encourage all commissioners to pick up the phone and reach out to Mrs. Fisk and her entire team to get us where we have a comfort level. Because the public, you know, if we've learned nothing in the last 3 years that I've been a commissioner, number of us 3, some of us well over 12, some 2, the likeliness of the public agreeing with what we're going to do here is kind of slim. So we own that responsibility to the public. Commissioner George.
So since Mrs. Fisk said she's looking for a consensus from the commission, I guess I would concur with both the mayor and Commissioner Jurdovic. I would not want to cut services. I would support giving the library their mill, but if we could stagger new hires and if we could look at the travel lines, those would be the 2 areas that I would also take a look into.
Commissioner Olson.
Just one comment on the travel and conferences. There are some that you just can't do online, like if you have to actually go somewhere, learn how to run equipment or do new police procedure, new fire procedures, run a new piece of equipment for public works. Those are things that you just can't do online. It has to be hands-on, so just keep that all in mind too.
There will be exceptions, certainly.
Yeah.
My comment wasn't to try to cut travel to zero. My comment is I just think there's some room there to, you know, cut back, because I do think there's a number of things that can be done remotely.
Nor was mine. Anyone else? Commissioners, Mrs. Fisk is looking for a consensus on approval of the preliminary budget with all of the specifics that we've all shared with her this evening, which obviously Emily's been taking very good notes on, and will lay those in front of Mrs. Fisk in the morning, I'm sure.
I've got them written down.
Commissioners?
So is this an actionable item or is it just a consent?
An actionable item.
You would be approving the preliminary budget as presented to you with the direction of me looking at those items that have been brought up.
And this includes the library's budget too? Or do you need 2 separate motions or just one?
No, you can do one.
Okay. And I'll make the motion to approve
Thank you,
both the cities and the library's budget.
Thank you, Commissioner Olson. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner George seconds. Been moved and seconded to approve the preliminary budget as presented this evening by Mrs. Fisk, Dr. Hanson, and Mrs. Hanson on the library. Is there any further discussion? Mr. Shockley has a point he'd like to make, or reprimand me, one of the two.
No, we also need to set the hearing date too.
September 20th. The final budget hearing will be September 20th.
Thank you, Mr. Shockley.
Sorry, thank you.
September 20th is also included. Is that all right with the motion in the second? Okay. Any further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
No.
Motion carries.
Thank you very much.
One dissenting vote. Item number 12, engineers report.
Thank you, Commission President Dardis, members of the commission. I really don't have much to offer for updates right now. Again, Communications Department does a great job of keeping all the information live and current on our website and shooting out the social media notifications like they do, so I will answer any questions if you have them.
How's our downtown Cheyenne Street project coming?
It's going well. Yep. They're well into phase 2 now, and they're putting the finishing touches on some of the phase 1 items. I know I think the planting beds they're gearing up to start working on this week. So project's still on track, going well.
I drove up Cheyenne Street all the way to 4th Avenue on the way up here tonight, so it's a nice, smooth road, and looked like phase 2 has progressed, that they could probably move on to phase 3 soon.
Absolutely.
I did the same thing 3 times today. So,
One other comment, if I could.
please.
On our walking path from 13th Avenue going north, just a comment, I've already seen people utilizing that. Skateboarding and walking on it, so that's perfect.
Absolutely.
I walked down it on Sunday and ignored the signage because I figured, why not? No one was there. It was beautiful. Loved it.
That is our concern right now, is that if it's being used before we're ready to use it.
Yeah.
But I know a couple weeks ago that was a bit of an issue, and we put some signs back up. But it's good to see that people are using it. Yep. Thank you.
Commissioner Simmons.
Dustin, I just have a question on the phase 2 on the planting of the grass and seeding or what have you. Where's that at? Are they gonna hold off until next year to do that portion of it? Do you know yet for sure?
I'm sorry, Commissioner Simmons, phase 2, are we still talking?
On Cheyenne Street, I'm sorry, Cheyenne Street.
Cheyenne Street?
Yeah, I jumped back there.
Phase 2, my understanding is that the seeding and stuff would take place yet this fall. I know that sometimes with phasing, when we get done with the phase, but it's in the middle of August, we generally will hold off on some of that turf establishment.
Okay, I just know obviously we're planning the parade. And so I'm thinking, and it's coming out, it should have come out this afternoon, a lot of the information. But I know that we may have to switch out a couple blocks. Rather than jump right on Cheyenne Street, we may have to go like on First Avenue, whatever it is, 2 blocks south and then come back to Cheyenne. But it'd be nice if we didn't have to do that. But I guess we just have to wait and kind of see what the weather's like, I'm sure too.
Weather's a big factor, yep, absolutely.
So,
But I will note that, and there is our weekly meeting tomorrow morning, so.
okay, maybe you can find out for me a little bit more where we're at with that.
West Fargo Events is obviously in charge of the parade, and Commissioner Simmons serves as the president of that board, so he's in the know, and certainly he will keep everybody accountable to make sure that our parade is.
Absolutely.
Yep. Yes, sir.
It is on.
Absolutely. Thank you.
How about the Excel Energy project? Just a quick update.
Yeah, Excel Energy project is, again, certainly a bit of a disruption here on 9th Street, but it's going well. They're working hard. They're working on the weekends. I did note that this past weekend here that they've got crews out there. They're making progress. So aside from the disruptions, things are going pretty well. I believe they're scheduled to have 9th Street fully open is still the middle of August, so we still have another couple weeks of what we're experiencing right now, but they are doing honestly much better than I anticipated, so.
I would agree with that. Anything else for Mr. Scott? Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Mrs. Fisk, City Administrator's report, please.
Thank you, Commission President and Commissioners. I have a couple items here, and then there is some information that our City Attorney, John Shockley, wants to discuss with you as well. First of all, in the consent agenda, you approved the water restrictions that were set in place because we're a customer of the City of Fargo. And I just want to remind you that this is Phase 2, which means mandatory odd even watering restrictions, meaning if you have an odd-numbered property, you water on an odd-numbered date of the day and vice versa for even.
Give us an example, please.
Like today is August 2nd. So if your house number ends in an even number, like 8 or 0, you can water today, but you can't water tomorrow. So that's how this will work. When we approved the contract with the City of Fargo, we agreed to adopt and enforce their drought and water service management plan, and that was actually adopted at that same time. But we also needed to adopt equivalent drought and water service response measures in the form of an ordinance, and John Shockley is working on that because we did not do that last part. So he'll be bringing that forward probably at the next meeting? Next meeting. So anyway, I'll go on. It's beyond that, there's no mandatory clawback. It's they request that you odd even water your gardens. They request that if you have a commercial vehicle washing facility, that you consider reducing your water usage, but you don't have to. Construction projects must use a hydrant meter. We do that already anyway. So it's not a large impact. It's something, a lot of times people follow the odd even watering days already. So it should not be too hard for our public. As far as enforcement, we're not going to drive around and look to see who's watering on an odd even wrong day. It would have to be complaint driven, and we don't really have that type of enforcement. All we can do is go there and ask them to please not water.
Will communications be sending this information out to the public? Will it be on our website?
Yes, she will. Melissa Richards has everything ready to go. She was going to send it out next week, but wanted to wait until you approved following suit, which we needed to do, so.
So you said we're in Phase 2?
Phase 2. They have four
phases.
phases.
4 phases, okay.
Yep. Phase 1 is just regular, and the difference between Phase 1 and 2 is basically, it's not mandatory, it's suggested to odd even water in a regular during the summer. That's the big difference.
Commissioner Simmons.
Just so the rest of the commission knows who haven't been here during a drought, this is nothing new. Even if it would be our water, we've done it in the past, and it's always been odd even gardening, and fortunately, we've never gotten to Phase 3 yet, so it's always been voluntary, and it's been fine. But it's nothing new, and our citizens know this is coming, I'm sure, so.
Up there, Emily was kind enough to put up the current for Phase 2, and also I believe you were going to get a copy of it at your spaces, but so I don't see any big issues with that. The other thing that I wanted to talk to you about is our September 6th meeting lands on Labor Day. So my request would be for you to consider moving it to Tuesday the 7th, and I would need a motion to approve that change.
I'll make that motion if there's no questions.
Second.
Any other discussion on any other dates from the other commissioners? So we have a motion to move the first September meeting of the West Fargo City Commission to September 7th. It's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries, September 7th.
Okay, well, lastly,
Please direct communications to also note that to the public. Thank you.
we will do so. Thank you very much, Commissioner President. The last thing I have is, as we're coming off a legislative session, there was a number of different rules and laws that were put into place, and we're working closely with John's office to make sure that we implement them. The newest one is the Sunday liquor sales, allowing places that if they so choose, they can open earlier for on and off sale in restaurants. So John will be bringing that forward to the next meeting if you are in favor of implementing the law. You aren't required to, but it is a state item out there. So,
Commissioners, consensus?
right, we'll be bringing that forward at the next meeting, and as other laws and rules come into place, we'll be bringing them forward as well. I know I was talking back and forth with Fargo Cast Public Health about the change in the tobacco to age 21, so that'll be coming forward as well. So, and with that, I will let Mr. Shockley talk to you and have a discussion about the implementation of District 2250.
Question for you. Yes. Before you move on. One of the things we had on the, did we pull it from the agenda or did we table it with regard to the purchasing policy? Where is?
That is still tabled. We're still working through the specifics of that policy. Mr. Shockley and I will be meeting again with our Assistant Administrator Tim and going through some details, trying to fine tune it. There's a couple things that we still need to clean up and then try and make it a little easier to manage.
Very good, thank you.
Yep. Anything else? Okay, thank you.
Mr. Shockley, please.
Thank you, Commission President. So my update is pretty short. The Special Assessment Commission met and we had multiple districts. So first I'll take the easy part. Every district except for 2250 is going to move forward and have a hearing before the City Commission at your first meeting in September, which is now September 7th. There were no objections to those districts, and so that's pretty much routine business. With respect to District 2250, during the process and hearing, we've determined, and I've determined, that the policy, the special assessment policy that we've had in place regarding equivalent units and street projects needs some updating based upon some property transactions that have occurred within the last 2 years within the district. And specifically, at the bookends, you have some very large platted properties that have some wonderful homes on them, and they're absolutely beautiful homes, but they're on very, very large lots. And at the same time, you have existing homes that are on smaller lots that might be 2.5 acres. And because of those transactions that have occurred within the last 2 years, the policy in its purest form as implemented may cause some disparity. And so that, in addition to, in the last 2 years, we've seen more condo units being developed within the city, which these are all good things for part of a growing city. But because the condo units are being developed, we had to go back and look at how do we treat these multifamily types of facilities that have more units in them, and as the nature of used to be single-family homes, we're now moving to more dense development, looking at how equivalent units for street projects are evaluated. And so my recommendation is that rather than bring that forward to the City Commission at this point, we would hold that in abeyance. We're going to propose a policy tweak only relating to equivalent units and street projects to the Commission, to the Special Assessment Policy. If the Commission adopts that, we would then take that policy back to the Special Assessment Commission and ask the Special Assessment Commission if they want to restart the 2250 process with the new policy. And so we're not asking the Commission to apply that policy to lots. We're just asking you to change the policy based upon some of the issues that we've seen in implementing it. And then if the Special Assessment Commission is in agreement on 2250, we would restart the process with the new policy, probably renotice it, go through a public hearing, and then it would come back to the City Commission. And that's my recommendation, just because of what I saw during the process. I felt that our policy needed some tweaks, not for any problems, but just because we've seen a lot different growth now, especially in the southern portion of the community. And to be frank, we're starting to see that in the north portion of the community with what's happening on Cheyenne. And so this policy also will impact assessments that would be levied in future years for the north side of the city where there's a lot more multifamily.
Thank you, Mr. Shockley. Questions, Zoe? having participated in that special assessment meeting, there were some very interesting inadequacies with regard to our current policy. And so I commend all involved, the Special Assessment Committee, Mrs. Fisk, Mr. Shockley, for everybody to engage in that, to make it so it's fair and equitable to everyone. So, good work, good work. Anything else? Mrs. Fisk? Commissioners, anything that you'd like to go to the order this evening? No? Any of the department's heads have anything for the good of the order this evening? Anything you'd like to share with us? Comment on? Seeing none. Commissioner Olson, or Commissioner Simmons, excuse me.
Move to adjourn.
I've had a tough evening.
yeah.
Commissioner Olson.
Second.
Been moved and second to adjourn. We stand adjourned.